The wind moved like a whisper through the empty alleys of the Appalachian mining town, dragging brittle leaves along cracked sidewalks. The town had once lived loudly echoes of engines, laughter, pickaxes ringing through the hills, but now only silence and wind kept company with the rusted signs and shuttered windows. Eli Davis pulled the collar of his flannel tighter round his neck, steam rising from his chipped thermos of black coffee. His boots crunched over the gravel path like clockwork, following the trail to the old mine. He had walked this path for 15 years, first as a foreman, then as a caretaker, and now just as a man with nowhere else to be. The mine stood ahead, sunken and still. Eli paused at the rusted gate, eyes lingering on the sagging entrance. The memories here were heavy. He could almost see the faces of the men who used to share this road with him. He exhaled slowly. That ache had become his daily companion since Martha passed 3 winters ago, and the kids stopped calling. The mine wasn't the only thing that felt abandoned. A low barker broken echo cut through the cold. Eli froze. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. One bark, then silence, then another, muffled and distant, like it came from under the earth itself. He turned sharply toward the entrance of the mine, his heartbeat speeding as the wind seemed to hush. There it was, again, a bark, followed by a whine. Not wild, not distant, desperate. Eli set his thermos down without looking. The bark hadn't come from the woods. It came from inside the mine. He didn't think so. His feet moved before his mind caught up. Maybe it was the years of training. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was something deeper. Whatever it was, he was already halfway to the entrance before he realized he hadn't grabbed a flashlight. The air changed the moment he stepped under the crumbling wooden beams. It smelled like earth, metal, and memory. His hand ran along the support rail, just to steady himself, not from fear of falling, but from the sudden wave of remembrance. He could still feel the rumble of the last cave-in, the way the ground had swallowed his friend Sam alive. The walls hadn't moved since then, but they hadn't forgiven either. Eli stood still. The bark came again, closer now, and no longer sharp. It was ragged, wounded, a cry more than a sound. His breath caught in his throat. Something was alive down there, trapped, scared, and for the first time in a long time, Eli felt something stir deep in his chest, sense of purpose, maybe even connection. He turned slowly, eyes adjusting to the dark. There was no clear path, no clear plan, just that sound and a gut-deep knowing that someone needed him. He stepped further into the mine, voice trembling as he called out softly, "I'm here, boy, hang on." The cold air thickened as Eli descended into the mouth of the mine. It wasn't just the chill, it was the pressure. Like the mountain itself held its breath. The beams above him groaned faintly, as if annoyed by the disturbance. Eli's boots scraped across the old path. His flashlight flickered once before catching hold. The beams swept across dust, old cables, broken crates. Somewhere up ahead, there was movement, or had he imagined it? He whispered again, "It's all right, I'm coming." His voice bounced off the stone walls like a stranger's. Then there, the light landed on a pair of eyes, not glowing, not wild, just watching. Scared, still, the dog was wedged between fallen beams and splintered rock. Its tan coat smudged with dirt, one back paw twisted beneath it. A low whimper escaped its throat, barely audible but raw with pain. The German shepherd didn't bark this time. It just stared, like it had already said all it needed to. Eli knelt slowly, hand gripping the flashlight tighter. "Well, you're not what I expected down here," he murmured. The dog's ears twitched, but it didn't move. Eli took in the wreckage. The old support beams must have collapsed during one of the recent rains. The debris had landed just shy of the dog's spine. One wrong move, and the whole section might come down again. His gut clenched. The paw was swollen. Maxie didn't know the name yet, but in his head, it was already Max was stuck, and they were alone. "I can't get to you yet," Eli said softly, blinking hard against the frustration. "But I'm gonna try." He stepped back and grabbed his two-way radio, static hissing as he thumbed the switch. "Unit 3 to base. I need volunteers down at the north shaft. Collapse reported. Dogs trapped, could be unstable." No answer, he gritted his teeth. Tried again this time, dialing directly to a few old friends who once shared this mine with him. "It's Eli, I need you please." Once the call was made, he sat on a nearby rock, flashlight steady on the shepherd. "I won't leave you," he promised. The shepherd didn't make a sound for a while. Eli tore open the jerky packet he kept in his coat pocket and tossed a piece gently across the rubble. It landed near the dog's front paws. After a long pause, the shepherd sniffed it, then pulled it in. "That's it," Eli encouraged. "You've got fight left in you." He continued talking about nothing in particular, the weather, the silence, the fact that he used to bring his old beagle here when he checked the mine's pumps. The shepherd listened, or at least didn't turn away, as Eli adjusted his light. He caught a glimpse of something under the dog's chest leather, half covered in dust. A collar. He leaned in carefully, angling the light. The tag was bent, scratched, but one name remained, etched: Max. Eli blinked. There was something about it, a pull in his chest. Not quite pain, but not peace either. "Max," he said aloud, testing the name like it belonged. The shepherd lifted his head slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. In those eyes, Eli saw more than fear. He saw grief. The kind that sat heavy in the bones and only got quieter, never smaller. He knew that look. He'd worn it in the mirror every morning since Martha passed. Since his home emptied out. Since he stopped believing anything could surprise him again. "You've been waiting a long time, haven't you?" Eli asked. The dog didn't reply. Didn't need to. The minutes turned to an hour, and still Eli waited. The sound of distant footsteps had yet to come, but he didn't shift, didn't glance at his watch. The cold didn't matter anymore. Neither did the silence. Max kept his eyes on Eli, and Eli kept talking, telling stories he hadn't told in years. About his kids, about Martha, about how sometimes the people who were supposed to stay just DID and single quotes, and somehow, through it all, the two of them held each other together, not with ropes or words, but with something steadier, faith. The hours stretched, thick and cold, like the walls of the mine were trying to trap time itself. The rescue team was delayed weather. Equipment, some of the men lived 2 towns over. Eli didn't flinch. He stayed beside the jagged edge of rubble, where Max lay trapped, his flashlight now dimming. No food, no extra coat. Just him, the dog, and the darkness that seemed to breathe around them. He hadn't moved since placing the radio down. When one of the crew radioed in and told him to go warm up at the truck, Eli only muttered, "He's alone. I won't leave." Him like that. Max's chest rose and fell slowly, his head occasionally twitching toward Eli's voice. He hadn't barked in hours, and Eli hadn't stopped talking by hour 5. A younger miner arrived with supplies, blanket, water, field, lantern, snacks. Eli didn't say thank you. He just nodded, knelt again near Max, and carefully laid the folded blanket beside the rubble to muffle the cold seeping from the stone floor. He poured a capful of water into a plastic lid and nudged it near the dog's reach. Max sniffed at it, then drank with soft, halting gulps. From his coat pocket, Eli pulled out a small, scuffed harmonica. He hadn't played since the funeral. His hand trembled as he lifted it to his lips. The first note cracked. The second slid smoother. A low, wandering tune drifted through the tunnel, part lullaby, part memory. Max lifted his head slightly. "It's all right, boy," Eli whispered between verses. "Just some noise, so you don't feel too alone." Max didn't flinch at the sound. In fact, the tension in his body slowly ebbed. His tail didn't wag, but it didn't brace either. His ears twitched toward the music like a child being sung. To sleep. Eli shifted closer, still not within reach, but closer, and continued playing, letting the harmonica do what words couldn't. He didn't know if Max understood, but in that quiet moment, it didn't matter. They were there, together, alive. The tune Eli played wasn't random. It was one Martha used to hum while she brushed her hair, or when she fed their beagle, Daisy. That dog had died 3 years before Martha, and Eli had never wanted another. Since he could still hear Martha laughing as Daisy leaped onto the bed with muddy paws. She'd loved animals like people, maybe more. Eli closed his eyes as the harmonica breathed those memories back into him, warm kitchens, muddy paw prints, and a woman whose voice calmed storms. "I'm sorry, Martha," he whispered between breaths of music. "I didn't save you, but maybe I can save him." When Eli opened his eyes, Max's snout was pressed gently against a beam, his eyes soft, half-lidded, but watching. Slowly, without a sound, Eli extended a hand between the broken rocks, open-palmed, not reaching to grab, but simply offering. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Max shifted his head, slow and strained, and rested his nose against Eli's fingers. Eli swallowed hard. It wasn't just a touch. It was an answer. A sudden tremor rolled through the tunnel, low and brief, but powerful. Loose dust rained from the beams above. A pipe groaned somewhere deep. Eli stumbled backward, heart racing, and dropped his flashlight. "Stay down," he shouted instinctively. Max let out a sharp bark. The first sound in hours, a warning. A mirror of Eli's own fear. When the rumble passed, silence returned like a crashing wave. Eli exhaled, chest heaving. Max whined softly. Eli crawled back to the rubble. "Still with me, boy?" A tired thump of a tail answered. The rescue crew had made it into the first chamber. Their voices now bounced faintly off stone walls, followed by scraping tools and the clang of metal. Eli leaned back, listening, but his mind drifted not to Max, but to the last time a tunnel collapsed around him. He'd survived. Sam hadn't. The guilt had stayed with him, even when no one said it was his fault. Later, when Martha got sick and the doctors couldn't do a thing, Eli felt that same helplessness. And again, when the kids moved on, to wrapped in their own lives to call, somewhere deep in him, he believed he was cursed to lose the ones he loved. As the crew drew closer, voices louder, Eli kept one hand on the beam beside Max and the other clenched in his lap. He wasn't sure what scared him more, the idea of Max not making it, or the idea that saving Max might let something inside himself heal that he didn't feel ready to face. He looked at the shepherd and saw not a victim but a mirror, wounded, waiting, worth saving. Max shifted again, fighting discomfort, eyes alert and still locked on Eli's. He didn't cry out, didn't whimper, just endured. It stirred something fierce in Eli, something buried and quiet, like a coal catching flame. If this dog, hurt and pinned and freezing, hadn't given up, then what right did he have to? "I've been alone too long," Eli said. Aloud, barely a whisper. Max blinked slowly, and for the first time, Eli saw more than pain in those eyes. He saw resolve. A call echoed through the mine. Final barriers almost clear. Eli pressed closer, touching Max's shoulder gently. "Hear that? They're coming." His voice cracked. "You just hang on, Max. Just a little more." Light began to leak through the cracks in the debris. The hum of machinery, the scrape of tools. It was almost time. But Eli didn't move. He stayed right where he was, eyes locked with the dogs. This wasn't just a rescue, it was redemption. The first sound was a low, cracked sob, sudden. Then the mine shook. A deep, rolling tremor surged through the ground beneath them like a beast turning in its sleep. Dust exploded from the walls. Eli instinctively threw himself over Max, shielding the dog with his own body as rocks rained down and steel groaned above. The rescuers near the barrier shouted, scattering as a beam cracked and dropped, slamming into the floor not 10 feet from where Eli had just been standing. "Get back!" Someone yelled, but Eli didn't move. He couldn't. Not while Max trembled beneath him, a young mantilla, the newest in the rescue, crew slipped as the floor pitched beneath him. A loose plank tumbled from above, headed straight for his back. Eli didn't think. He pushed off the rubble and lunged. The impact knocked the breath from him as he covered Tyler with his own frame. The plank crashed beside them, splintering against the stone floor. Tyler gasped. "Mr. Davison, you..." "I'm fine," Eli muttered, wincing. "But next time, duck faster." Behind them, Max whimpered a sharp, aching sound that snapped Eli's head around. He was still trapped, still in danger, and Eli's time was running out. After the tremor faded, silence returned, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that made your skin crawl, the kind that knew another collapse might come at any second. The men stood frozen, breathing hard, covered in dust. Eli sat back against a beam, heart pounding. Every muscle in his body buzzed with adrenaline. But it wasn't himself he worried for. Max hadn't moved much. His breathing was ragged. His pot twisted and swollen looked worse than before. He'd made it this far, but barely. If they stopped now, if they left, he wouldn't survive the next quake. "We might need to back out," someone said quietly. One of the older miners. "Structure's not stable." Eli turned toward them. "So we leave him." No one answered. Another voice added, "We get pinned down in here. We're no use to anyone." Eli clenched his fists. He understood the risk. He'd seen men buried in these tunnels. But walking away now, after Max had held on so long, his voice cracked. He's waited 12 hours, alone, in pain, and he never gave up. His eyes moved across the crew. "Don't make him wait for nothing." Eli pulled himself to his feet slowly. His body ached from the dive, the years, the weight of memories. But his stance was steady. "You remember Sam Whitaker," he said. "You remember the day this mine folded in on us, and no one thought we'd make it?" There were nods. Faces softened. "We didn't quit on each other then," Eli said. "Don't quit now." He stepped closer to Max's side, kneeling back beside the shepherd. If it were one of us under that rock, you'd still be digging. The silence that followed wasn't fear. It was a decision. They got back to work, no shouting, just purpose. One of the crew spotted a gap through a narrow side tunnel, barely shoulder width, but stable. It would take a lot of maneuvering, but it might be enough. Eli helped guide the rigged stretcher they'd brought, crawling forward on elbows as the others held lights. The air got tighter, colder then. At last, Eli reached Max. "I've got you, buddy," he whispered. He slid his arms gently under Max's body. The dog tensed, whimpered, but didn't resist. Carefully, they lifted him onto the stretcher and began the long, slow crawl back to daylight. By the time they reached the surface, the sun had begun to rise behind the hills. Max didn't lift his head. His coat was matted with dirt and blood. His ribs barely moved with each breath, but his eyes opened and the first thing they found was Eli. "It's all right now," Eli whispered, crouching beside him. "We made it." Max let out one weak whine and tucked his head under Eli's hand. Eli didn't speak. He sat on the gravel, cradling Max's head against his chest, his weathered fingers stroking the dog's ears as silent tears cut paths through the dust on his face. Around them, the other men watched in quiet respect. No one dared interrupt. Max shifted once, letting out a slow breath. Safe, grounded. For the first time in a long time. Eli didn't feel like a man weighed down by grief. He felt whole. The local news crews arrived before the dust even settled. Cameras flashed. Reporters called his name. "Mr. Davis, is it true you stayed in the mine the whole night? How does it feel to be a hero?" Eli didn't answer. He walked past them, carrying Max in his arms like a father would a child. He laid the dog gently in the bed of his truck, wrapped him in a warm blanket, and sat beside him. Max's breathing was slow but steady. His paw twitched once, and Eli smiled. "I'm no hero," he murmured. "Just a man who owed someone a second chance." The truck pulled into the gravel driveway just after dawn. Eli stepped out slowly, cradling Max in his arms. The dog was wrapped in a wool blanket, his eyes half closed, his breathing steady but faint. The door creaked open, and for the first time in years, it didn't echo. Inside, Eli laid Max down gently on a folded quilt near the hearth. The fire from last night had gone out, but the room still held a kind of warmth different than heat. A quieter warmth, one that came from present. The house hadn't felt alive in a long time. But with Max cold there, wounded but home, something had changed. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't empty. The days that followed were slow and deliberate. Vet visits became a ritual. Driving with Max beside him. The window cracked just enough for the dog's nose to catch the wind. The vet said the leg would heal with time and patience. Eli said they had both short walks replaced long silences. Eli would pace the yard with Max hobbling beside him, leash hanging loose in one hand, coffee in the other. Some days Max would stop short and sit down in the middle of the path. Eli never rushed him. "We'll go when you're ready," he'd say, and Max always rose again. Nights were different now. Eli found himself speaking aloud, again, not to fill the space, but to someone who was listening. Max would lie by the fireplace, eyes flickering with the flames, ears twitching at the sound of Eli's voice. "Thought I was done talking to anyone but myself," Eli said one night, chuckling softly. "Turns out you're better company than most folks I know." Max didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence between them was no longer lonely. Word of the rescue had spread how an old miner stayed 12 hours in a collapsing shaft for a dog he didn't even know. People were curious. Neighbors began stopping by. Some brought treats for Max. Others brought casseroles or coffee or just a listening ear. Eli, once the quiet shadow of the street, started opening the door without dread. He even kept the porch light on after sunset. One neighbor, a widow named Lorna, lingered one day longer than usual. "Didn't think I'd see you smiling again," she said gently. "Didn't think I would either," Eli replied, glancing at Max. It happened on a Tuesday morning. The sky was overcast, the ground damp from a light rain. Eli was sipping coffee in his chair when Max limped into the room, tail wagging gently. In his mouth, he carried something small, metal, and oddly familiar. Eli squinted. The harmonica. Max dropped it on his lap, then sat down, expectant. Eli stared for a long moment, then laughed, gravelly broken, but whole. A real laugh. The kind he hadn't felt since Martha's funeral. "You remember that, huh?" he said, picking up the instrument. "All right then." He played a few soft notes. Max listened, tail thudding once against the floor. The tune didn't hurt this time. The mine path hadn't changed, was still cracked and steep, still bordered by ghosts of the past. But when Eli and Max walked it now, it felt less like mourning and more like memory. They took the trail slowly, Max's stride still uneven, Eli's steps careful but sure. Sometimes they'd stop where the rescue began, both gazing into the mouth of the mine. Other times, they'd keep going past the rusted gate, past the silence. Eli no longer feared what the mine held, because he knew what he had brought out of it. Weeks later, Eli stood at the local animal shelter with Max resting beside him. Now stronger, more alert, he told their story about the mine, about waiting, about survival. His voice cracked when he mentioned the look in Max's eyes that first day and how it mirrored something he hadn't known he still carried. People listened. Some cried. A few filled out adoption forms right then and there. Eli didn't tell them what to feel. He just shared the truth. Sometimes all someone needs is to be seen and to be waited for. Their bond went beyond rescue, beyond survival. Eli no longer felt like a man at the end of something. Max had pulled him forward, paw by paw, breath by breath. In Max's steady companionship, Eli found not just healing but direction, a reason to wake up, a reason to open the door, a reason to believe again. They weren't just man and dog. They were proof that broken things don't stay broken. Forever, Eli stood in front of the school library, worn flannel tucked into his jeans, fingers lightly stroking the top of Max's head as the shepherd sat loyally beside him. A group of children sat cross-legged, their eyes wide, their notebooks untouched. He waited, Eli said, voice soft but sure. Down there in the dark, injured, alone. He didn't bark for help, he just ... waited. Max lifted his head slightly, as if remembering. "We like to think we rescue them," Eli continued. "But sometimes, they rescue us right back." The children leaned in closer. "Not all heroes walk on two legs," he said with a gentle smile. "Some just wait long enough for someone to come looking." Eli knelt so he was eye level with a boy who'd stayed behind after the talk, his eyes red-rimmed but curious. "Was he scared?" the boy asked, barely above a whisper. Eli nodded. "He was, but he still trusted. Every time I brought him water, Every time I spoke, he listened. He didn't run. That kind of trust. Eli paused, his throat tightening. That kind of love doesn't always speak loud, but it's there, every time they show up, every time they stay. Max nudged the boy's hand with his nose, and the boy smiled, quiet but real. Later that week, the mine trail reopened under a new name, Max's Path. A wooden sign marked the entrance, hand-carved with careful letters, and 2 sets of footprints, one booted, one pedetched beneath. Locals walked the trail not to mourn, but to remember. Children ran ahead, laughing. Adults walked slower, more thoughtful. Some left dog treats near the sign. Others just stood in silence, eyes misted over. But every step echoed the same truth. The trail was no longer about collapse or grief, it was about survival, about the power of staying. Evenings have settled gently now. Eli's chair creaked as he rocked slowly and steady on the porch. Max rested beside him, head on Eli's boot, breath deep and even. There was no more fear, no more hiding, just the quiet rhythm of 2 hearts healed by one another. Eli looked out at the hills, the sun dipping low, and whispered without looking down, "You saved me too, boy." Max didn't move. He didn't need to. The peace was already between them, curled in fur, tucked into silence, and resting exactly where it belonged.